Hey guys, so hopefully I'm doing this right. I've never done this before, so I'm just going to start and hopefully it records. So I decided to do my presentation on abuse of the elderly. I think I decided to do this because through a lot of the classes I've taken so far, it's been something that's really interested me, and I've done a lot of work with the elderly population in the past with some volunteer work through college and other things. So I was just kind of interested in learning more about it and then sharing it with you guys as well. So, elder abuse defined. Elder abuse includes any kind of abuse. So it's not just physical, it's all the things we don't think of: emotional, sexual, exploitation, neglect, abandonment, and one that we often forget about is financial neglect or abuse. A lot of times we or family members work closely with them and control their finances if the elderly person is not able to do so. And at that point, uh, they can take advantage of their money. Um, so anybody can technically be the perpetrator of elder abuse. So an estimated 5 million elders are abused a year. So the types of abuse, like I talked about before, there's physical abuse, which means any kind of physical pain or injury caused to the elder person. It doesn't necessarily have to leave a mark. Sometimes it does, but any kind of physical abuse. Sexual abuse, so touching, fondling, intercourse, or any kind of sexual activity when the elderly person is not able to understand or give consent. Um, is considered abuse. Emotional abuse, so the verbal part of things, harassment, intimidating them. Sometimes people intimidate their elderly family member or whoever it is that you're watching. Um, the other ones that I didn't know about that I found were confinement, which is any instance in which an older adult is isolated or restrained for anything but medical attention. So in any way, kind of like cornering an adult or confining them. And then passive neglect, which is just failure to give any care to them at all. So just kind of leaving them to fend for themselves when they are not able to do so. And so continued, we have the financial exploitation that we had talked about before. So it's any misuse or mistreatment of their financial resources. Um, and willful deprivation, which is another one that was new to me. So this is when an older adult is denied medical care or medication, shelter, food, or any type of assistance, and further exposes them to anything putting them at risk of either physical or mental or emotional harm. Um, so the only time that this doesn't happen is when that elder person is able to state that they want to go without care. So if they say, I don't want to be on life support anymore, that's their choice, that kind of thing. So another fact, studies show that only 1 in 14 cases of elder abuse are reported to authority. So who can be the people that are abusers of the elderly? So who are the perpetrators? So anybody that is assuming a caregiver role can be the abuser. Men, women, family members. A lot of times it's either spouses or older children of the elderly, but it could also be in-home caregivers or workers at a nursing home, any of that. So about 60% of elder abuse cases are cases in which the elder is abused by a family member. So again, a lot of it does come from the family, but it can be other people as well. So just some things to look out for if your family member goes into a nursing home. Abuse there can happen as well, not just at home. So approximately 1 in 10 Americans over the age of 60 have experienced some form of elder abuse. And I thought that was a pretty high statistic when you're thinking about that overall. What makes an elderly person more vulnerable to abuse? So social isolation was one of them, when they're kind of unable to move about on their own, um, whether they're in a wheelchair or whatever it may be. Uh, and somebody has to constantly be there to take care of them or get them to the bathroom, get them food, take them outside, take them to the grocery store, any of that. And then any mental impairments. So a lot of times we see dementia or Alzheimer's in older patients, and this leads to them being easily taken advantage of by their caregivers because they start to lose their memory. And sometimes there are also physical impairments as well. So some of the warning signs of elderly abuse, any sort of neglect. So when I had first wrote this, I had talked about medical needs that weren't being met, or poor hygiene, and rapid change in weight, showing that they're not being fed or properly taken care of. But also things like bed sores, which wasn't something I had thought about. But bed sores would mean that they've been left there alone for quite some time and haven't been properly cared for. Emotional abuse could be withdrawal from any type of event. So if they typically like to go to reading club with their friends in the nursing home and they suddenly decide they don't want to do that, that would be that. Or change in alertness or depression. So again, isolating themselves when they typically don't. Physical abuse, so it could be reported, but also if there are any marks on the person, broken bones, bruises, burns, marks of any sort, scratches, any of that. Financial abuse, so any change in financial situation. So a lot of times these people don't really have access to the bank or to any of their money on their own. So if there's a rapid change in their financial situation, and they're not able to do it themselves, that's a sign that somebody's taking advantage of them. And then verbal emotional abuse, again, the threats or a power struggle, I guess, by the caregiver toward the adult would be one as well. So warning signs you can look for if you suspect that somebody you know is the abuser or the abusee, so it can go either way. Those signs might show in either one of them. So another fact, elder abuse typically takes place in the home in which the elder adult resides. It can also happen in institutional setting, including long-term care facilities that the elderly adult may be staying in. So again, we talked about that before. A lot of times it happens at home, but it can always happen in nursing homes or rehabilitation. It can happen in the hospital with nurses. So there are a lot of places that it can happen. Effects on the elder from the abuse. From being abused, it can raise or increase their chance of an earlier death, especially if it's the emotional or physical abuse. It takes a toll on them greatly. Severe injuries, if they're being physically abused and it goes unnoticed for a long time, they could sustain some pretty bad bruises or injuries. Sleep disturbances, so if their sleeping pattern is suddenly off, that could be a sign of abuse and could have a lasting effect on them, kind of like PTSD. Learned helplessness, so they kind of just give up hope on everything. Increased risk of fear and anxiety. Every time a caregiver comes around, they're constantly afraid or on edge, and they have a lot of anxiety. And like I said before, the PTSD, which kind of goes in with the sleep disturbances. So if you are an abuser and you do get caught or you get turned in, it kind of varies state to state. It depends on what your state is. So at the end of this, I have attached a website, which is cited down here at the bottom, NCOA, and it gives the different penalties for different states, and so what those adults will be facing. But typically it does end up in jail time. So how can you prevent elder abuse? Obviously, one of the most obvious things to think about is calling 911 or turning it or calling it in, reporting it, and letting the authorities take it over. Another thing is if you suspect it, just like we would do with any other situation for any other age person, whether it be a child or an infant or an adult, you would call Adult Protective Services or DSS in general and report it to them. And then hopefully they can kind of sort through the case and visit the home or the adult that it's happening to and work more toward that. And then something else I found was to contact the elder care locator, and I put the number on here to find your local elder care help centers. So this website, if you type it in, gives you different resources to use. So next slides for more information. This was just one really helpful site, NCLER, which is National Center of Law and Elder Rights. It gives you every right that elder adults should have, and it also gives you different resources to visit to investigate more on the rights of elder abuse, or what else goes along with it, or who can be at fault for elder abuse, how to tell the signs more in depth, and all of that. And it gives a lot of statistics as well, so check that out. And then my last page is just my resources, and these resources were really helpful. They had a lot of different statistics on them, especially the Do Something one that is my last one. So it's 11 facts about elder abuse. And to me, I feel like I know quite a bit about this, but that was the last website I found, and it helped me understand more how bad of a problem it actually is. So hopefully this presentation was helpful and you learned a little bit about abuse of the elderly. And if you have any questions, feel free to write me a message.